interface between the energy and practitioner. As per the yoga texts, there are 9 types of emotions that dwell in the human mind. These include fear, anger, greed, pride, lust, etc. The all-knowing supreme primordial energy manifests a variety of kriyas so that the sensual impressions pertaining to all the 9 types of emotions are removed forever from the mind of a practitioner. It burns down the very seeds of these emotions inside the mind itself so that they do not germinate under any kind of physical or mental conditions. As a result, the practitioner becomes permanently free of all thoughts and emotions. Now, readers can very easily understand that mere suppression or control of these thoughts could not be of any benefit to a person. They need to be permanently eliminated, and this can only be done by the divine force. The practitioner will be truly amazed when they see the very vast multitude of subconscious sensual impressions that have been recorded in their mind. The practitioner will find an unimaginable and unthinkable variety of thoughts surfacing and flashing in their mind space without any voluntary mental effort. The primordial energy will dig deep into the depth of the mind and comprehensively clean it of all the sensual impressions ever recorded. As the sensual impressions are removed, the mind slowly starts settling down into a state of calmness and tranquility. As a result, the spirit or the absolute consciousness dwelling within the heart of every human being gets a glimpse of its true nature, reflected in the tranquil state of mind. This used to manifest in my mind in the form of extremely bright sunlight. Sometimes the sun would look a little dull as if masked by a thin smoke screen. However, what is important is not the appearance of this bright light, but rather its impact on the state of mind of the practitioner. Furthermore, how long this state lasts in the mind is also important. Usually, after a good session of meditation, the effect lasts for at least 2 or 3 days, although the period can't be fixed very precisely. As I have said earlier, sensual impressions can't be completely erased overnight. It is a gradual process that takes place over a prolonged period of time. I will narrate a few incidents so as to illustrate how sensual impressions pertaining to the 9 types of emotions are erased from the mind. For sensual impressions to be removed, the supreme energy ensures that an event pertaining to a particular emotion is experienced by the practitioner in a mild form. Sometimes an experience might be repeated several times or even over a prolonged period of time, thus chipping away the solid thick layer of emotions little by little. Although at an accelerated pace, every practitioner of yoga must remember that his or her destiny will unfold at a rapid rate when compared with a normal person. I have elaborated on this in one of the chapters. As this process unfolds, the all-knowing energy simultaneously ensures that the mental equilibrium of the concerned person is perfectly maintained. While I was living in Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir, Kriya had begun to manifest for the first time. As a result, I had subsequently started overflowing with the emotion of pride. I had started behaving like a great stage of meditation. Or maybe these impressions were already accumulated in my mind earlier during past lives. I was told that there was a cave on a mountain top in the middle of Srinagar, where one of the great popular sages in India called Shankaracharya had lived and meditated more than 1,000 years ago. My interest was piqued and I decided to visit the cave and do a session of meditation there as to benefit from the powerful vibrations and also the tranquil ambience. I went to the mountain top in my car and then further climbed up steep stairs to the cave. The cave was so small and at the best could accommodate 6 to 8 people. I went to a corner of a cave and sat cross-legged for a session of meditation. However, this mountain happened to be a popular tourist destination in Srinagar. As a result, there was a steady traffic of tourists entering and leaving the cave. Initially, my mind was getting disturbed, although the vibrations inside the cave were very powerful and I could feel them very clearly. And then it suddenly happened. I lapsed into a concentrated session of meditation that lasted for more than 2 hours. I sat on the bare stone floor of the cave with my toes pressed against the floor. However, my mind was totally immobilized and my posture was completely rock steady. Slowly, the noise level of tourists started diminishing and I started lapsing into the state of serious meditation. Even in this state, I could still hear the voice of the tourists and on a few occasions could hear them commenting on my meditation practice in a very positive tone. Suddenly, the emotion of pride surged up from the depth of my subconscious mind. I started to feel like a great sage myself. The peaceful session of meditation had temporarily gone for the sake. I sat there with my heart swollen with pride for a considerable amount of time before I was unable to recover from the reaction occurring inside my mind. Of course, I was able to come back to the normal state of meditation after some time. This is how the clinging of the mind of all sensual impressions pertaining to the emotion of pride unfolded. The necessary ambience for this had been ensured by the energy itself that had inspired me to go to the cave and practice meditation. Here, readers are requested to understand that sensual impressions are erased from the mind either by removing the ego directly or by making the practitioner undergo the experience in the mild form. The way of the premodal energy functions is extremely subtle and thus difficult to understand. On August 29, 2011, I was traveling by car from Srinagar to visit a famous shrine called Vaishno Devi. I halted for the night en route in the nearby town of Udhampur. There I stayed with a friend of mine who was also planning to visit the shrine along with me on the following day. The next day morning, both of us left for the town of Katra, located at the base of the Trikuta mountain in the Himalayas. The Vaishno Devi shrine is located below the top of the mountain in the cave. This is one of the most popular religious shrines in India, especially for energy worshippers. We both traveled in a jeep and reached the town of Katra around 9 or 10 in the morning. I had planned to climb the steep mountain on horseback, whereas my friend was insisting on climbing it on foot due to religious reasons. I was adamant and was in no mood to climb on foot. After reaching the town of Katra, I changed my plan and decided to take a helicopter ride to reach the shrine. So we both reached the helipad to buy the tickets. At the helipad, when we inquired about the availability of seats in the helicopter, a member of the ticketing staff pointed his finger upwards into the air. At this point, I realized that the weather was totally cloudy on top of the mountain and that all helicopter flights had been suspended temporarily. We were further told that there was a long backlog of tourists that had been piling up since the morning. With no other option, we both reached the pony point to hire 2 horses. To my horror, we found out that all the horsemen had called for the general strike against the local government authorities and were out of business temporarily. Then I asked for the palanquin, even they were out of the commission. With no helicopters, horses, and palanquins, all my options to avoid climbing the mountain were fast running out. Finally, the time came to take a decision as to whether to climb the mountain on foot or to turn back. My friend, who happened to be a childhood buddy, was thoroughly enjoying my discomfort and was laughing to the hilt. Somehow, I managed to make up my mind and decided to climb the mountain on foot. The total distance we climbed was about 14 kilometers on a steep gradient. It usually takes 4 to 5 hours to climb the mountain on foot. After we both climbed half the distance, there was a sudden commotion. The helicopters had resumed operating, horsemen could be seen appearing all of a sudden, and palanquin bearers were busy doing brisk business. When we inquired about the reason for all this commotion, we were told that the strike was called off by the horsemen due to reconciliation with the local government authorities. Further adding salt to my wound, a horseman turned up in front of me promptly with a pony and offered his services. I was in such an angry state against the goddess Vashnu Devi for making me undergo this climb that I decided to climb the rest of the route on foot only. However, surprisingly, the climb was very easy and I did not feel any exhaustion at all. This is how the process of cleaning the mind of all the egoistic impressions by the supreme cosmic energy unfolds. A few days later, on September 3rd, 2011, I was visiting a yogi retreat called the Narayan Kuti Sannyas Ashram in the city of Devas. Readers might remember that I had written about this ashram in one of the earlier chapters. I had learned later that there was a cave inside the ashram in which several sages had practiced serious meditation. So naturally, my interest was piqued, and I went to the ashram and sat inside the cave to practice the repetition of my mantra. To my total surprise, I just could not recollect one of the lines of my mantra. This was a big shock to me because I had been practicing the repetition of this mantra on a daily basis for quite some time now. After struggling to remember the line of the mantra for quite some time, I had to finally give up. I left the ashram totally disappointed and reached my hotel room. The moment I stepped inside my room, I was able to recollect the lines of the mantra almost immediately. On the next day, I went to the ashram once again and sat inside the cave to meditate and practice the repetition of my mantra. The meditation must have lasted for more than an hour or so when all of a sudden it started raining heavily outside the cave. The meditation got disturbed briefly and I opened my eyes only to start staring into stark blackness inside the cave. Since the electricity was cut off, I thought that the best thing to do was to go ahead with the meditation. So I once again closed my eyes and started meditating. The heavy downpour of rain continued outside the cave with water splashing against the cave from all sides. My meditation continued inside the cave with the full knowledge that I was sitting all alone in the completely dark place with the electric supply cut off. Furthermore, the thought that the cave was separated from rest of the ashram buildings was also lingering in my mind. Heavy downpour of rain accompanied by thundering and lightning down continued outside the cave unabated. Somewhere I had read that the cave was inhabited by devils or human spirits. The word devil does not necessarily mean evil spirits. Rather, a devil is a spirit without the gross physical body. It could be human or any animal. Further, there is no guarantee for any human spirit to take birth again as a human only. The spirit could well degenerate and take birth in animal forms, later followed by the human force once again. According to the yoga text, this is a very common phenomena that happens to every living creature. This is the reason why it is said that the supreme divinity is enshrined in every living creature on the earth. The thought that there may be some spirits present inside the cave flashed through my mind. As a result of this entire ambience around me and also the frame of my mind, I suddenly got overpowered by this strong spell of fear. I went into a total state of panic due to this unknown fear. This mental state lasted for several minutes. Finally, I was forced to open my eyes to stare into the darkness of the cave. I could not continue my meditation any longer. On the other hand, I knew that stopping the Kriya because of fear in my mind space went against the principle of meditation of the Shaktipat order. Thus, after spending a few more minutes with this dilemma lingering in my mind, I decided to switch on my mobile phone torchlight and walk out of the cave. This is an example of the process of cleaning the mind of all its fear impressions, particularly regarding spirits and devils, that is carried out by the cosmic energy. While I was in the city of Devas, I had decided to visit another important place. I had learned earlier that there was an adept in yoga who lived in that city more than 100 years ago in the tradition of Nath, a yoga order that had been existed in India since ancient times. This great yogi called Baba Shela Nath used to keep a piece of burning wood with him at all times. Burning wood is a symbol of the burning down of sensual impressions from the mind of the practitioner. After his departure from the city, his devotees continued the tradition of burning a wooden log. Even today, one can see a burning wooden log kept at the place where Baba Shela Nath once practiced his meditation. The place is called Baba Shela Nath Dhuni Samsthan and is located on the outskirts of the city. So naturally, I got interested in seeing this place and went there to pay my obeisance. I saw the wooden log burning and sat there to meditate. I was hoping to spend a few minutes in the tranquil atmosphere before departing from the city. To my total experience, I lapsed into the highly concentrated session of meditation that lasted for a couple of hours. I had not intended to do any meditation at this place. Furthermore, I was in a hurry to leave the city due to the long drives that I had to make on the other day. However, in spite of all this, I had been forced to lapse into the serious session of meditation. This sort of kriya usually takes place due to meditation practices done in past lives. These impressions also need to be erased from the mind. The reader should understand that the primordial energy erases each and every sensual impression from the mind of a practitioner. As per yoga texts, it ultimately erases the very idea that a person has ever existed separately from the supreme divinity. This is how yoga or joining of the individual soul with the divine is affected. After my visit to Devas, I drove down to a place called Basara on the banks of the Godavari River in the modern day state of Telangana in India. A great sage called Vyas, who is also popularly accepted to be the compiler of the Vedas and the Mahabharata during ancient times, used to live and meditate at this place. The cave in which he is believed to have meditated still exists in the small town of Basara. So naturally, my interest was piqued, and I went to visit this cave and also do a session of meditation. The cave was very small and narrow. I had to crawl through the entrance to get inside. However, the interior of the cave could accommodate 4 to 5 persons. So I sat cross legs for a session of meditation. I was told at the entrance of the cave that it would be closer in an hour. Furthermore, regular tourists were also going in and out of the cave. The cave was lit up inside. However, I was sitting on the farther edge in the shadows so that my meditation would not be disturbed by the tourists. The vibrations were very powerful inside the cave. I could feel the impact of the vibrations on my mind. After all, thousands of years ago, a great sage has meditated in this very cave. The ambience inside the cave was totally charged with positive vibrations. My meditation must have lasted for an hour or so when I got disturbed due to some unknown reason. I had opened my eyes and found that the electric lights were switched off and that there was very little sunlight entering the cave from one of the corners. Furthermore, I found that the flow of tourists had completely stopped. The place appeared totally deserted. I was not sure if the attendant of the tourist department was still present at the entrance of the cave. Furthermore, this cave was located on a small hillock surrounded by thick vegetation. I had started to suspect that the attendant hadn't noticed me sitting inside the cave and had enclosed the entrance. The cave would not be opened till the next day. My mind started to fall into the trap of fear once again, similar to the way it had in the city of Devas. But this time I decided not to give in to the fear and continued to sit there and closed my eyes once again for meditation. At the worst, I thought I would have to spend the night in the cave without food and water. I was very sure that the cave would be opened the following morning. Thus, with the issue resolved in my mind, I continued to meditate inside the cave. However, the wave of fear lasted continuously, unabated in spite of all my rationalistic reasoning and self assurance. The meditation must have lasted for barely another 15 minutes or so when the fear of psychosis became so intense that I had to finally give in and open my eyes. I crawled out of the cave to realize that the attendant was still waiting for me outside the cave. He politely informed me that he saw me meditating and decided to wait for me for some time more so that my meditation is not disturbed. I have narrated the ever incidents to explain to the reader just how the interface occurs between the supreme cosmic energy and the daily routine life of a practitioner. The cosmic energy is clearly experienced by the practitioner as a separate entity that is interactive. Incidents of this nature has occurred on numerous occasions in my life. I hope readers can now easily comprehend the various other types of kriya which occurred in my daily routine life. However, readers might point out the incidents of this nature described above can happen to anyone in the normal course of life. Here, I would like to draw the attention to the readers to my earlier chapters on the flow of energy in my body. When the flow of energy is experienced inside the body as a separate entity, it defies all logic and rational scientific explanation. After the experience, the practitioner's state of mind gets altered drastically. Energy is experienced by the practitioner as a separate entity from the self from the point onwards. As a practitioner advances further in the yoga practice, this dualistic distinction is removed with the knowledge of the true nature of the primordial force. The true nature of the energy needs to be revealed to the practitioner by the very energy itself by bringing about the necessary transformation in the mind. A sort of interface between the energy and the practitioner is set up in a normal daily life exactly for this purpose. Various incidents in the normal daily routine of a person, like the events which were described earlier, occur and the person is adequately sensitized to the subtle workings in the cosmic energy. The mind of a practitioner is slowly elevated to the state where the knowledge of the true nature of the primordial energy. Let me further elaborate on this. In a normal human being, the ego is in the state of full bloom. Everything or anything done by a person instills a sense of self-doing in that person. A person experiences oneness with the supreme energy without realizing that it is the supreme cosmic energy which is the cause and effect of everything and anything done by that person. The person thinks he or she is in control. It is in fact the mind that thinks that it is the supreme self, or the self or the spirit thinks it is that mind under the influence of cosmic illusion. Hence, the mind or the apparent self is tricked into believing that it is the doer of an action, even though it has no actual power. The mind takes the supreme energy for granted and thinks that it is the supreme energy. The illusionary power of the cosmics has tricked the mind into thinking this way. since the mind is also nothing but this very supreme energy in another form from the earthly point of view. The mind is also not lying. However, there is a complete twist to this entire story. When the primordial energy is activated in a person, this energy is distinctly perceived as a supreme entity inside the body of a person. At this stage, the mind is humbled down for the first time. The mind realizes for the first time that it has no control over any physical or psychic phenomenon. Now the mind gives up and surrenders. As the mind surrenders, it is simultaneously cleaned of the ego and all sensual impressions. As a result, the reflection of the Supreme Spirit is observed for the first time in the tranquil waters of the mind. The result is truly devastating. The supreme primordial cosmic energy, which is nothing but the spirit itself, will now start revealing its true nature by means of a series of interactions with the person. A sort of interface occurs between the supreme energy and the practitioner, and the process of self-realization begins. Thereafter, the practitioner starts realizing that the energy within the self and the energy outside the self in the external world is one and the same thing. As a result of this experience, the perception that the supreme energy is a separate entity from the self is removed. The person also starts realizing that it is in fact his or her energy, indeed that he or she has been experiencing earlier as a separate entity. As a result, the practitioner experiences oneness with the supreme energy. However, unlike a normal person, they do so with the full knowledge of the nature of the supreme energy. The difference is a normal person is in a state of ignorance, while the practitioner becomes aware of the true nature of the self. This is the difference. It is simple as that. Nothing spectacular happens from an earthly point of view. The interactions between the energy and the practitioner tend to be somewhat playful in nature. So as to have a minimal impact on the mind, these interactions also take place to make the mind realize that it is not the self. The above phenomena cannot be comprehended by way of any logical or rational explanation. The mechanism of the functioning of the supreme primordial cosmic energy is extremely subtle. It has to be directly experienced within the self. Let me elaborate on this further. The process of self-realization is a structured phenomena. Its manifestation occurs in 4 different stages as per the yoga text. I will try to put across the readers the best possible explanation of these 4 stages honestly with the limitations of my vocabulary and intellect. Firstly, the energy is experienced as inseparable from the self of a person who is under the spell of cosmic illusion. This is to say, the mind of a person thinks it is only real existence. The self and the energy are ignorantly experienced as one without true knowledge of the energy. It is actually the mind of a person that thinks in this way. As a result, the perception of non-duality takes place in the mind. It is not the pure self or spirit that caused this thought. Rather, it is the mind that mistakenly thinks it is the self. Thus, the mind thinks it is one and the same as supreme energy. When the supreme energy is activated by a guru and starts to operate in reverse mode, the mind receives its first shock. It becomes aware that it is not everything. This is the first stage. As a result, the perception of non-duality takes place in the mind. It is not the pure self or spirit that caused this thought. Rather, it is the mind that mistakenly thinks it is the self. Thus, the mind thinks it is one and the same as the supreme energy. When the supreme energy is activated by a guru and starts to operate in reverse mode, the mind receives its first shock. It becomes aware that it is not everything. It is the first stage. Thereafter, there is an intermediate second stage where the person realizes that his or her body is completely filled with this cosmic energy to the brim. Other than this, no major transformation occurs in the mind. It is at this stage that the independent and autonomous functioning of the Supreme Energy is distinctively felt as a separate entity. The mind is humbled for the first time. It is forced to look inwards. Without this internal focus, further investigation cannot take place. The mind now becomes the observer, the object of observation, and also the laboratory. Finally, everything is resolved internally and the mind gives up and surrenders. The person enters into a state of thoughtlessness. When the mind, which has so far been masking the Supreme Spirit, gives up, the Spirit is reflected in the tranquil waters of the calm mind. The self of a person starts realizing that the energy and the self are one and the same thing. The non-duality is experienced with the full knowledge of the true nature of the Supreme Energy. By now, the person is in possession of supernatural powers, since the person has full knowledge of the nature of the energy and can exercise control over all physical and psychic phenomena. As per the yoga texts, enlightenment or self-realization occurs at the will of the Almighty. When this self-realization occurs, even the laws of yoga automatically break down, or to put in another word, there is no need to be bound by any laws or conditions in the cosmos. The objective of yoga at this point has been completed. The spirit at the individual level can no longer be restricted to the human body, since the merger with the universe soul has already taken place. After this is the final stage, and I am not even competent enough to comment upon it. It is the Supreme Almighty that we were discussing here. The capability to simultaneously be in a state of witness and also roam amidst the illusionary reality in human form is technically not possible from the point of yoga. That means a person who had transcended the laws of science and yoga will have to return to earthly life and still remain detached emotionally from the world around them. However, this capability has been demonstrated by very few men in the history of a human race. They are popularly accepted as divine incarnations who have appeared in the form of Rama, Krishna, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, and also other incarnations in various other religions. Hence, I cannot comment on the final stage.